What's up, Ben?
What's going on, Braden?
So, this is episode 2 of Mindful Marketing. So, marketers have a close personal relationship with data and metrics. However, it can often get super overwhelming. There's all kinds of data and metrics flying at you all the time. And statistics say that 85% of marketers actually feel overwhelmed and burnt out. So, today we're just going to kind of do an overrated, underrated type of thing with metrics and kind of figure out what we think is most important to focus on as marketers in specific phases of the marketing cycle. So, this is mindful marketing, and we're just here basically to help keep marketers sharp and focused, and honestly, kind of just quiet the noise in the super noisy marketing world. So, what we do all the time is actually drink some specialty coffee while we talk. Ben, what are you drinking this morning?
Drinking the same one I had Monday, so it's a natural processed from a local coffee shop, 392, and they
Brandywine roasters. We figured that out.
yep, with the cat logo.
They're good. Very good.
Very good. What about
I'm
yourself?
I'm drinking the black and bold that I kind of messed up, but I'm almost done with it, so I'll probably try something else.
Nice.
So first of all, before we jump into all the marketing stuff, let's give a quick shout out to Aaron Judge for hitting home run number 62 on the season. So he just passed Roger Maris, right, on from the American League in the single season home run record. And that's huge. That's like those are kind of those records. Well, Barry Bonds hit 74.
Yeah.
That's one of those records like you don't know if it's going to be touched. And part of it's because of the steroid era, but I it's crazy when people like try to take all the Barry Bonds did away from him
Well,
because of
McGuire also
steroids.
hit like 70.
Yeah. That
Too.
whole league, like the Sosa, McGuire, Bonds,
Yeah.
that was wild. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, the steroids definitely helped with power. Um, but you got to be an amazing hitter to start. So, anyway, let's get into marketing stuff, huh? So, I got like a few slides I want to just go over about metrics, and then we can start to do our over under thing. So,
Cool.
marketing metrics. So, according to a study with Google and MIT, 89% of marketers use strategic metrics to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. And if you're a marketer, that means you probably do, and you probably should, because otherwise it's kind of just a shot in the dark. So, one of the problems is that sometimes when we're looking at metrics or thinking about using them, this is what it feels like. There's like all kinds of different things. I mean, it feels like we're on Sesame Street here with all these alphabet. It's like CAC, TTV, ROAS, CPM, MQL to SQL, LTV, and the list goes on and on. Um, it feels like a combination of algebra class and Sesame Street, and sometimes we don't know how to make sense of all these letters and numbers. So sometimes it feels like we're on National Treasure. I'm sure you like this movie, Ben, huh?
Dude, I love this movie.
Yeah,
That
they're
was
good. I mean,
good.
Nicolas Cage's claim to fame, but basically, it feels like we're on National Treasure, just trying to decode this massive puzzle and figure out like the holy grail metrics that are going to really show our business exactly how to move forward and exactly how we're going to be successful. But I recently listened to a podcast with Christo and Neil Hoyne. He's one of the lead people at Google. And one thing he said is that you don't have to be perfect, just better than everyone else. And this is kind of going, I kind of had a mindset shift recently about metrics. after listening to this guy, um, he's all about, instead of just trying to gather all the data you can, all the different CAC and ROAS and LTV, and then make sense of it. He's like, use the scientific method and start with observations and hypotheses, and then you can gather data to either support or refute it. So I think that's been super helpful. So this is basically what he says. Don't gather all the data, try to organize it, and see what you find. Instead, start with a hypothesis, pull the data in that will help you test it. And that helps keep you from going absolutely insane and kind of just focuses in the metrics. So basically, what we want to do when we're trying to figure that out is we start with things like KPIs, which are key performance indicators. So, for example, a KPI would be new contracts. Like if you want to sign 5 new contracts, or let's say you want to double revenue or increase your user base by 50%. Once you find those things, you're going to figure out what metrics can help me illustrate this or see if it's actually happening, see if it's working. So you always start with those KPIs first, instead of just jumping straight into the metrics. So is that all making sense?
Mm-hmm.
So now, that's basically just overall. What do you think, Ben, about that mindset shift of trying to gather all kinds of data and metrics? Because in the beginning, I was kind of like doing that because I know the power in data, but then
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it just ends up overwhelming you, and you don't really know what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, a couple thoughts that come to mind, especially like, as you're just showcasing the slides, is when you're showing all of the metrics, essentially like LTV, CAC, ROAS, like cost per click, etc. Um, I just remember like basically when I started learning about all of this, and like CPM, cost per thousand, confused the heck out of me, just
Yeah.
because I was like, one, I don't understand why they have an M still instead of a T, just because
Yeah.
I always think like cost per million. Um,
Yeah.
but it's just weird. So like thinking back to like when I started learning about all these metrics, and it was unbelievably overwhelming, and I easily see how it's very hard for people, as it was for myself, to really understand all of it and what is important. And at first I was like, why the heck is it important for me to get like impressions or for people to see it? Like, what does that even mean? um,
Yeah.
and kind of now it's like, okay, data can be super overwhelming, even though now I'm starting to understand all of the metrics, et cetera, what exactly they mean, their purpose, the value in each of them. But it's like, it can be all great, but it still overwhelms you to try to collect everything at every like channel level, at every single part of your campaign or
Yeah.
product level. And it doesn't really help if you don't have a direction, which is kind of where the hypothesis comes in. And that's like kind of the nice thing is like both of you and I took a lot of science classes and did like labs and stuff in college where that's all it was is you come up with a hypothesis, you test it, you see what the data supports, and
Hmm.
then rework it. So if it's like that, which is kind of how we're approaching things more so now, is it's a lot easier, and it's kind of the steps seem to be a lot more functional and kind of self-explanatory in a way, where otherwise if you're just trying to collect all the data all at once, without any direction or vision or hypothesis of what you think is going to happen, then it's like you're trying to dig into all of these numbers and you're not really going to find an answer.
No, definitely not. And it reminds me of, I saw a video of Alex Hormozy recently. He was like, you level up. So at certain times, like when you're ready. So for example, if you can't do algebra before you know how to do simple
Yeah.
addition and subtraction. So it's like, us trying to use CPM without really understanding the basics behind it, about what it is, what it's good for,
Hmm.
will just confuse us and make it all worse. It's like trying to solve an algebra equation without knowing how to add.
Yeah.
So then you start to figure out like CPM, like impressions can be good for overall brand awareness.
Hmm.
And in the beginning of campaigns, when you don't have those deep conversion metrics, you can do more things based on impression and clicks to
Hmm.
try to build up
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I
stuff.
think it's like it'd be more simple actions that you're going to be basing stuff off of versus like absolute end goal.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of the tough part as like for marketers in general, whether it's like you're in an agency or in a job role, right? Is either way, you're being tasked with generating somebody more revenue um, in some type
Mhm.
of way. And then it's tough because really at the end of the day, like either your boss or the board or whatever, or the client, they care about is that they're making more money, and then that you're driving them more leads, and they're closing more leads essentially. So with the branding side of it, is an important function. And as starting out, it's kind of tough because it's like you want to produce results. Like, most marketers are very results driven,
Mhm.
but it's hard to start a campaign and then the first week, start really seeing a lot of sales just because you really don't know what's going to work at first. And so
Mhm.
it's like tough to find out, okay, what exactly should like metric should I go off of in the beginning to kind of start to get to that increase in sales, but also you do want to like structure it in a way so you start producing sales quick. So it shows either your client or your director, board, or whoever that you're doing a great job, you're producing results, etc.
Yeah, and one thing that's a little bit tough for us even, because 'cause we're a performance-based company, which means we're paid based on either commission of revenue or gross profit, or like a price per lead. And what's tough about that is that it naturally makes us want to optimize for conversions, which is great. I mean, a lot of people just automatically wanna go to conversions, but there's, customers will browse and there'll be multiple touch points, maybe multiple emails to get to know you and your company before they actually pull the trigger. So a lot of the time, there's a lot of brand awareness and other touch points that go into it that aren't just the initial conversion. And that's where we start to talk about the tiers of buyers. There's ready to buy at the very bottom of the funnel who are trying to convert now. There's soon to buy, which are in the middle of the funnel, who might need a little bit more convincing, but they're close. And then there's later to buy, who just became aware of the problem and
Hmm.
maybe you exist as a company.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of important what you're talking about here too, because it's like marketers, we want to obviously the results thing, so we want to structure campaigns for conversions, but there's can be quite a few problems with that within different scenarios. Like one, like we have a client that just moved, right? So he's in a new area where really nobody knows his construction company, so it's gonna cost a little bit more like per lead or per conversion to close somebody or to collect a lead, because basically, like Braden said, they haven't had those previous touch points yet. So they haven't heard of you, etc. Maybe their friend hasn't talked about you yet, type stuff like that. So it's kind of tough. It takes a little bit longer, takes a little bit more, like a little bit brand awareness, but it takes more clicks essentially for the system to learn who, whether you're on Google, Facebook, etc., to learn who is your type of customer essentially. And this goes for the same thing, even if a company's established for a long time, they do new product releases or new service releases. So that's all new. Like Google, Facebook, they have zero data on any of that for you. They have data previously on other things, but if you're releasing a new product, all of your other your other data you've already collected might not be that target market essentially for that product. So it's going to take time for that system on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google or whatever it is to learn, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like kind of starting usually campaigns, if you're doing like a ad campaign, like with clicks, is usually best, just because it's going to take the system less time to learn, because it's easier steps for it to see what's starting to get traction. And then after you get a certain amount, you can start switching to conversions.
Yeah. And that's what we kind of say to more so beginners or maybe business owners who don't know much about marketing, who want to
Mhm.
start doing like paid advertising. Um, so basically there's three ways to really increase your revenue. There's traffic. This can either be online digital traffic or foot traffic. Obviously, digital traffic is really good because you don't have all that overhead of the building, um, and it can get out in front of more people. So anyway, so there's traffic, conversions, and then basically price. We kind of call it LTV, which is lifetime value, but basically you think about it in terms of price. And if two of them remain completely equal and you increase one of them, let's say you double one of them, so you have a certain amount of traffic, let's say 1,000 people, conversions at 2%, and then a price point of $3,000. If the price and the traffic remain the same, and you just take the conversion rate from 2% to 4%, you double the amount of revenue you're bringing in. So, I forgot, where was I going with that? Anyway, so yeah, basically, if you're beginning, just strip it all down and focus on one thing at a time. So we would say just start with Google search ads to a landing page. And then you basically just see how that does. And then you can adjust from there. But don't try to throw the kitchen sink at it because we've done that and it doesn't work. It'll kill you. So let's do some of these marketing metrics. So we're going to do an over under. Now, just a disclaimer, all marketing metrics are useful in certain cases. So it's just like I hate when people say like, is this food bad for you? Like no food is just inherently bad for you given nothing else. Like everything is related to the circumstances.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, quick example, like a lot of professional like fitness athletes, like CrossFit athletes, some will like literally drink pop right after an event just to get enough sugar in their system.
mhm.
Um, and then they feel a lot better. Inherently, we would say pop's bad for you, but in that scenario, it's actually really good for them to help them kind of recover and get back to the next event.
Yeah. So basically, it's all contextual. So we're basically going to use these as how people generally think of them and use them, just like first impressions. So, take this with a grain of salt. Um, the first one, you see that up on the top, Ben? Likes and followers. So this is like, let's say, Instagram or just social media in general. Everyone associates likes with Instagram, but likes and followers, a lot of time people are trying to get these numbers up. What do you think about it, Ben?
I would say, for the most part, overrated.
Yes, I would agree that this is overrated. Likes and followers are quite a vanity metric. Like it's almost the highest form of vanity metric, which means it looks good and it feels good up front, but is it actually doing anything? Because there are so many times when there's some influencers or something with 1 million followers, but not a lot of engagement
Hmm.
or not a good way to monetize it. And then there are some with 3,000 followers who are making far more money, they're making more impact, and their followers are like hardcore
Yeah.
behind them.
Because that's a
So,
big thing for, I think, a lot of company owners or marketers in general to understand. If like kind of this is a little new, it used to be like likes and follows at the surface level were awesome, and I thought that like 8 years ago or whatever, You got to increase that, and naturally, it's just you'll be in a good spot essentially. But really, the little deeper metric below that would be engagement. So getting more likes and followers is all good as long as the engagement comes with it. But for example, like Braden and I, we were scaling Native Root Coffee, and we were talking to some influencers in like different areas to essentially promote our coffee and be like an influencer of the coffee. And they had like 1,000 to 2,000 followers, and they were charging like $1,000 to $2,000 for a post, like one post. And that's because they get super high engagement. And it's very interesting. You would think that amount of money would be, for somebody like 10 or 20,000 followers or something like that, but it's really more based on the engagement level with a lot of these things. And a lot of the major companies, they're actually looking more for those micro influencers with a couple thousand followers, but who are getting like 500 comments and et cetera all the time.
Yeah, definitely the engagement is huge. And then also like there's a guy I follow on LinkedIn, Justin Welsh, and his following, it's obviously grown a lot. So he has kind of both now, which is amazing. That's why he's has a one-man multi-million dollar show. But it's because like what he says to his following like really believes, and there's gonna be a super high conversion rate. Because like when he puts a course out there, it's not like maybe 2% getting it. He's probably like double digit percentages buying that course because they just believe in him. They believe he's in their best interest. So that's huge. Engagement and then just overall like trust and belief.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, impressions. We talked about this a little bit ago. What you think, Ben?
I would also say this is overrated.
Yeah, I would agree. Impressions are overrated because they don't really tell you a whole lot. I mean, in order to have a really good like goal around impressions, you have to have a lot of previous data. So if you're trying to go for brand awareness or something, you have to say our impressions are growing this exponentially or something. It's just hard to really
Mm-hmm.
use unless you're at the very, very beginning and you have nothing and you want to just build up impressions to be able to start to work people in the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because impressions are just the people who have seen your post or ad or whatever. So, like, that's good in a way because you're doing a little bit of brand awareness, stuff like that. Maybe people are starting to see you more because you're maybe organic impressions are going up. But ad wise, it's not really going to change a ton because unless if people are sharing your ad, then obviously you're going to get a whole lot more impressions, but that's kind of a different metric.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, impressions are tough. They can be useful because it's like on Facebook, that's essentially what you're buying is impressions. But after amount of time, you can start to calculate on average, if I get this many impressions, I'm going to get this many clicks and this many conversions essentially. So then it becomes valuable. You know how much money you're going to essentially spend or have to spend to get a certain amount of revenue in return. So
One case where impressions could be super useful is I've heard before that big companies, right before they do a TV commercial, they will prime it on like social media. So it's almost like the movie with Will Smith and Margot Robbie when they were like magicians. It's like you're almost priming them to just see it. If you want people to just like see it, even if they scroll by it, just see your
mm-hmm.
brand so that it's priming them. But it takes a lot of money in order to do something like that.
Yep.
But you could prime them so that when they see a conversion ad, then they have a little bit of priming there. How many times can I say prime in one sentence? So overall, we'll say impressions is overrated, but good in certain cases. Next one is cost per click. So the formula for cost per click is basically the overall cost of a campaign or an ad, if you want to go to the ad level, over the number of clicks that it's getting. And these don't all have to be just overrated, underrated. They can be perfectly rated. This is like Goldilocks here, if you
Yeah.
think.
So I would say I think this one's a little harder because in the beginning, I would say of a campaign, it's decently rated.
Right.
But then it tails off to more overrated just because I think you can focus too much. A lot of marketers focus way too much on cost per click, or business owners, just because it's an easier metric to see and understand. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but reality is that it's easy to essentially trick and make something super clickbaity so you get a super low cost per click. So then it's really inaccurate of what it's really doing for you as a company and, selling your product or service or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, in the beginning, I would say it's rated fine. And then as a campaign goes, I think it's overrated.
Yeah. And what Ben's talking about in that last part is like you could make an ad, like let's say I was a home builder, you can make an ad that says enter your email to win a free home, like a free $300,000 home. And you'd get so many clicks, your cost per click would be so low, but the conversions later on would be also so low that if you just
Yeah.
straight up maybe in the beginning offered what your service is and enter your email for this great service, you would get a lot higher cost per click, but a lot more of those people would convert.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. Basically, Braden's talking about like cost per lead too, and even like a little less of an example is like we've ran some like Facebook ads for like a custom home, and the cost per click is like 60 cents or whatever. So it's like very, very little, but everybody loves to see a new house. I mean, that's something everybody's obsessed with, and most people like open houses are no one's going to buy it who goes to an open house almost. So it's very similar just on a digital platform. So that one's kind of tough because you can get a ton of clicks, but really the
Yeah.
like if someone actually interested is super low.
Yeah. So I think overall in the beginning it's kind of rated okay. It's rated well, but then if you focus on it long term and try to just continue to look at that CPC like months and years into the future, I think it can be bad because then you should start to know what's
Mm-hmm.
actually converting people.
Are these
And
emojis preset?
huh?
Are these emojis preset?
No, I put them in here.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah.
dang.
So basically, yeah, just make sure you're graduating from CPC to the more profitability ones. So the next one is conversion rate. And before I kind of mentioned it's one of the three elements of increasing revenue is your traffic, your conversion, and your price. So what do you think, Ben?
I would say underrated just because, I mean,
Yes.
if you increase your conversion rate on the ad level and landing page level, you dramatically increase the revenue you generate.
Yes. And talk a little bit more about increasing conversion rate. I'm gonna pull up a
Yeah.
little picture
So I
here.
mean, are you pulling up the funnel picture?
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially what Braden's going to show is a funnel. So if you picture the top of an ad campaign, so let's say you're running like $10,000 on Google Ads or whatever, maybe it's Facebook ads, anything like that. So you're going to get a certain amount of soldiers or people, consumers interested in said product that $10,000 is going to hit. So like impressions essentially, right? And on Google, you're going to pay like a cost per click. So let's say it's like maybe $5 per click. On Facebook, it's more cost per million or cost per thousand type thing. So you'll some people send them to a website, some people send them to a landing page. Landing pages are typically going to get a lot better conversion rate. I don't recommend sending them to a website, but we can get into that later. So essentially, you will convert on the left side 3%, let's say, which can be a pretty honestly high conversion rate, especially if you're sending them to a website. But they say kind of like on an e-commerce store, if you have a 2% conversion rate, that you'll become a millionaire. But that's also with e-commerce and not sending people just to the homepage, and that's with overall traffic. But after you get a certain amount of people to convert, so some people entered your website, 3% of them filled out the form or booked a call or whatever, your salespeople are going to call, and naturally over time, your salespeople have a close rate. So let's say each smiley face is worth a $300,000 client. Well, if your salespeople close 15%, that's $2.5 million in revenue. So essentially, if we basically take paid traffic is the same, so $10,000 either on Google or Facebook, and then the salespeople have the same rate at 15%, but yet we double the conversion rate from 3% to 6%, our revenue also doubles, yet we paid the same amount in traffic to these pages. And a lot of this comes from personalizing landing pages to the product or service or target market that you are targeting, essentially. So locational based, interest based, etc. So if you really do increase your conversion rate, you can easily double, triple, potentially, or even more, 5x your revenue just by personalizing your landing pages or personalizing your ads, etc. Just because the conversion rate is huge. It's a simple number. You see what is converting better, and then just go based off of that, essentially. And the higher you get that, the more revenue you get based off of the same amount of money for traffic, which is amazing. Because normally you think of, like, for Google, like it's $5 per click or maybe $10 per click. Okay, I got to pay, let's say it's $10 per click. I had to pay $1,000 for 100 clicks then. Well, if I want 200, I got to pay 2,000, etc. But if I have a higher landing page conversion rate to book a call or whatever, submit a lead form, then those 100 clicks maybe go from only like 3 people converting to book a call to 10 people converting. And then I well over just tripled my revenue because I'm going to close more of them. So then it's just pretty crazy, just the power of basically increasing your conversion rate.
Yeah. And some people would ask us why we're focusing so heavily on that blue funnel there. And most of it's because we had like a web design background, and we saw a big opportunity there. A lot of the landing pages were just flat out dropping the ball. Like, if they would load, they would load extremely slow. There'd be tons of call to actions. It would have a terrible mobile experience, and like 90% of the people are seeing it on mobile. Sometimes the forms wouldn't work. Sometimes it was just straight up the homepage, where the other parts of the funnel, like the top paid traffic, I mean, Facebook and Google, they have really good platforms for that, for testing. And it's been worked out quite a bit. The sales part, I mean, companies have their own sales systems. That's a whole thing in itself, trying to train a sales team. And so, I mean, we just saw an opportunity in that middle part of the funnel, where it's like people's landing pages flat out kind of suck, and we can make it better. So overall, we think conversion rate is probably underrated, just because it's very powerful to increase your revenue, but a lot of people aren't taking advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is going to be customer acquisition cost, also known as CAC. So CAC is basically your cost. So whatever you're spending for a campaign or for an ad, over the number of conversions that it makes. So let's say you spend $1,000 on this Google ad, and then you convert 2% of those people. Your customer acquisition cost would basically be $1,000 over, well, the number of conversions, not the conversion rate. So if you converted like 10 people, then it would be $2,000 divided by 10. So basically your CAC would be 200. So let's see. Overrated, underrated.
I'd say super underrated.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even know theirs.
So I think this is a metric that comes more into companies that are scaling or starting to get into like um, VC, venture capitalist funding, things like that. Some medium large to larger companies probably know this more so. It seems just it's kind of tough. Smaller companies, there's not enough resources essentially, and just time in the day to figure this out. But this becomes super important because if you know your customer acquisition cost, it's a really nice metric to go off of. Because let's say you profit, like you're in construction and you're profiting like 15%, or let's just make it easy, 10%. So 10%, you sell like a $20,000 job. So you're profiting $2,000, and it only costs you like $200 to get a customer. So for every $200 you spend, you get a new customer at $20,000, you profit 2K. So essentially you're profiting at $1,800, subtracting that $200 customer acquisition cost. So now you know of, hey, if I want to spend $1,000, I probably will get 5 new customers. So that would be, then $100,000. So for every $1,000 I spend on ads, I can make another $100,000. And then it allows you to start thinking of like, okay, so how much would I need to spend to do to $200,000 to $500,000, etc. Where this becomes big in helping you scale and grow your company, because now it's like, I know how much money I need to put into marketing to cover added overhead in the sense of employees or whatever it may be to help you accomplish taking on more work, right? So then it provides a little bit of safety in a way, or security, knowing of, on average, this is what I have to spend. And if I can lower the customer acquisition cost even further, then my money goes farther and I'm profiting more per client. So there's really 2 ways to grow a company, and they both really deal with customer acquisition cost. And one is making each of your clients worth more money. So essentially, you increase their lifetime value, so they spend more money with you essentially, or you charge more. Number 2 is you take on more clients, and the lower customer acquisition cost equates to more profit, which allows you to do both. So if you lower what it takes to obtain a new client, well, then you're essentially making each client worth more because they're more profitable. As well as that extra profit can help you take on more clients by either helping you pay for more employees or putting some of that profit back into marketing to take on more clients, essentially. And some would argue maybe like decreasing your overhead would be another way to grow a company, but essentially the more you grow, the more overhead you're going to have as well. So that kind of negates itself in the long run. But yeah, I would say customer acquisition cost is super underrated. It's definitely, if this is something you're looking to, like if you have a company that you're looking to really grow and scale and looking to take on investors, this is something they will ask you.
Yes. And if you have a few different super high ticket items, seeing your customer acquisition cost for each one can be super important, because let's say you sell 2 things for $5,000. One of them, your customer acquisition cost is 3,000, and the other one, your customer acquisition cost is 1,000. That second one is going to be much more scalable because the ratio is great. And that's when we start to combine CAC with LTV, which is lifetime value of something, because that ratio can be super helpful with scaling, because it's basically money in versus money out. So overall, we'd say that CAC is pretty dang underrated. Next one, we got 4 more. So we have close rate. So like we mentioned before in the little slide, let me get that back up. So your close rate is basically down, it's that third little cylinder. So you get people in with traffic, you get conversions, and then you sell them, you close them. And so what do we think about a close rate?
I would say this one's probably like rated pretty good, just
Yeah,
because
because everybody
it seems like
talks
most
about
people
it.
do it.
It's like in sales um, courses all the time. Go ahead.
No, you can go for it.
Yeah, so I was thinking like this is one of those things that I hear like constantly. I don't know. It could be the people I follow on YouTube and stuff like the Hormozis and the Grant Cardones, but everybody's talking about little hacks to get your close rates up.
Mm-hmm.
And ABC always be closing, and sales
Yeah.
has been around for so long since the beginning of humankind. Whereas some of these other ones like conversions and paid traffic, although they've been around in a certain way, it's changed drastically through
Yeah.
like internet, where the close rate, a lot of those systems are kind of like, still intact. But so close rate, I mean, it comes down to sales. We would think it's pretty average rated. I mean, it's rated what it should be. So the next one would be LTV, so lifetime value, and then CLV. So there's a distinction here, and I'm going to try to explain it. So it's tough. So LTV is basically the revenue over the number of customers. So let's say, let me think. There's a few different ways to calculate this. So if you have data from the past and you want to back calculate your LTV, you can do this formula that's on the screen, which is basically revenue divided by the number of customers you've had.
So it's
And this,
like all-time revenue divided by number of customers you've all-time had.
yeah, well, I would say within the past couple years, if you've been
Mm-hmm.
in business for a long time, because for example, if your business grows exponentially,
Mm-hmm.
then this would be skewed.
Yeah.
Um, so if you have a long track record and the last couple of years have been somewhat steady, you can do revenue over customers. So, and you can tease this out for specific products, or you can just do this overall for the entire company. And then the way to forecast it into the future would basically be the average number of times that people buy times the average price that they buy at. So let's say you have a $3,000 item, and on average, they buy it 2 times. That means the LTV for a customer would basically be, I forgot which numbers I used, but just multiply those. So the price times the number of times they buy. So it's basically just trying to get the lifetime value of a customer. Okay, so does that make sense at all? My
I think so, yeah. I
a little
mean,
bit.
this is a harder one to understand for sure.
It's tough. Um, and then CLV. So CLV is actually the lifetime value of a specific customer. So the first one, LTV, is more of like an aggregate. So you can figure it out for products or for your company overall. It's kind of like averages, where the CLV is calculating what a specific customer, based on maybe their attributes, like where they came from, what they clicked on, how many times they've interacted with your company, what they will be worth over time to your company. So where LTV is kind of just like a singular number, CLV is going to look more like a spreadsheet or a list where you have the customer and then next to it you have the CLV, like what they will probably be worth to you. So that's why the calculation I say good luck is because it's super complicated. And if you going back to that podcast I listened to with the Google guy, he said if you look on Google to help you calculate it, he's like the first 3 pages are completely wrong. Um, the CLV calculation takes a lot of AI and
Mhm.
really, really dense formulas.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as more could be an important metric for large scale companies. Essentially, is
Yeah,
for anything small to medium, like you said, good luck, and it's just not worth it to try.
yeah. And what you can do now is actually, if you have a spreadsheet, if you've been in business for like 5 plus years and you have quite a big customer base and you have like data on them, what they've purchased for how much, things like that, you can enter that spreadsheet into an AI database, and it will basically spit out one that has that list that I was talking about, where it's customer, how much they'll be worth to you, which is great. That's amazing because then you can start to group them based on
Hmm.
those attributes and start to see like Google customers acquired from Google that have received 5 emails are so
Hmm.
much more valuable than Facebook kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very valuable, but really hard to do. Um, LTV, let's just focus on LTV then, because CLV is pretty tough. So
Um, I would say it's like maybe underrated, maybe rated properly. Just because a lot of people do know uh, decently, at least what their LTV is that we've talked to at least. So that's been cool. But I mean, I think LTV is super important to know just because it helps you understand with your customer acquisition cost, is that profitable or not? So if your lifetime value is 1,000 of a customer and your customer acquisition cost is like $200, as long as that lifetime value is profit of 1,000, then yeah, you're profiting like $800 every time you get a new customer.
mhm.
So it's just trying to kind of figure that out. So combining customer acquisition cost and LTV is super important, I think.
Yeah, I would say it's slightly underrated. It's not as underrated as CAC,
Mm-hmm.
but because a lot of people can kind of estimate it,
Yeah.
but it is a very vital piece to that CAC to LTV ratio. Um, so I would say so overall, we'd say it's probably between those. Um, and then just to clarify the the calculation. Um, so let's just take an example. Let's say we have a music teacher who gives piano lessons, and each lesson is $100, and he can tell you on average a student will stay on for 12 months. So let's say $100 a month times 12 months. So that means on average his LTV would be $1,200. So just simple example to calculate it. So next one, we got return on ad spend, also known as ROAS. So this kind of basically just means if you put $1 in to the machine, to a campaign or an ad, how many dollars in revenue will you get out? So this isn't telling the whole picture because you have overhead, you have cost of goods sold, but it's a very simple money in, money out. So
So yeah, underrated. There, a lot of companies don't use this. I think a lot of people focus more so on cost per lead or cost per click type metrics than their ROAS, as at least of what we've seen. There's been a few companies, like some bigger companies that we've worked with or talked to, that start to know their ROAS. It also seems like the car industry is know their ROAS pretty well, just because they advertise like more than anybody. Um, but I think this is super important to know because it helps you get an idea of how profitable your marketing is, because marketing should only be profitable. It should only be bringing you in more money.
Yeah. I think because we spoke with like a huge Fortune 500 marketing company a little while ago, and they were telling us that their clients lock in and laser in on that ROAS number, which tells you that it's pretty dang important, that in itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's super comforting to know that like if I give you like as a company, if they give us $1 and we give them back $10, that feels good. That
Yeah.
feels, and obviously you got to take margins and stuff into account, but you know, your margins shouldn't eliminate all that, hopefully. Otherwise, your business has worse problems. So then once you get down to like a ROAS of like 1, so it's like 1-to-1, that's when you really need to fix it.
Yeah.
Because then if it goes less than 1, you're losing money. And then the more over 1 it goes, and obviously this needs to be benchmarked because certain industries will have like a 3 ROAS on average. Others will have like a 10 based on
Yeah.
margins. For example, construction, a contractor might make maybe a 10% margin before overhead. So they need to have a much higher ROAS
Yeah.
than a margin business.
Yep.
Overall, we'd say probably ROAS. So, all right, got 2 more. We got profit over ad spend. So this is very similar, but there's 2 different types of profit. Obviously, there's gross profit, which is before overhead is taken into account. It's kind of like revenue minus cost of goods sold, materials, things like that, labor. And then there's net profit over ad spend, which is the whole picture. So it's taking your overhead into account. And I would say this one's pretty gosh darn underrated because it's just like ROAS. And even though it might not seem as sexy, if you give us $1, we give you 10. It's showing more of the full picture of like when we take our cost consideration, really helping us grow. And this is one I mean, most people don't do ROAS, and almost nobody does POAS. And it sounds kind of fun to say.
Yeah.
So just for that alone. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Yeah, I think POAS is super important just because it does give you the full picture, and then you don't have to wonder like, okay, if I have a 10 ROAS, how much profit am I really keeping out of that for every dollar I spend? I get 10 in return.
yeah, because then if you're just doing ROAS, it takes a little bit of work for your client to actually try to figure out, because they know in their head, they're like, revenue isn't the full picture. They're like, I have all kinds of costs. So if you can do a G POAS, a gross POAS, and an N POAS, it starts to show them the full picture, which they like. Because you could have a 10 ROAS and then like a 1 POAS, and then be like, all right, I'm not really growing through this. So the last one we got is TTV, time to value. This one's coming up more recently, and this has to do a lot with our value equation. So Alex Hormozy, we follow him a lot. He has this amazing value equation. We'll go over it in a different live, but this is a key element of it. And it's basically like the time delay that it takes before someone really starts to see value from your product or service.
I would say severely underrated. Just because I think this comes up just more so with a lot of the conversations we've had, like in the past year with clients or small businesses or like neighborhood committees, like stuff like that. Just they talk a lot about how Amazon is destroying their company and Walmart, their Amazon and Walmart, they're taking all over the business and stuff. Which, yeah, both obviously mega companies doing super well for themselves and offer quite a bit of value for consumers. And I guess just like an example to kind of help explain this, it's like this neighborhood committee we talked to, they talked about how Small Business Saturday is like their biggest seller of the whole year. They make the most money, they bring in the most revenue that Saturday. But I also think that's a very large problem, because that means 364 days a year you make less money than that one day. And you're saying that people care about small business when they really don't. It's because if they did, they would stop really purchasing all the time on Amazon. But they always do. And a big thing that Amazon has been able to do is to decrease their time to value. So obviously we talk a lot about as marketers that you like have to click just one time to purchase something on Amazon. But now basically everything you order on Amazon, you get it in 2 days or less. And that's the time to value. So whatever your essentially customer's dream outcome is, whatever they want a six-pack of abs? Do they want to grow their company like 2x or whatever? How long is that going to take you to deliver that to them? So if it's less time, because as we know in a society today, we don't like to wait at all. So the faster we can get something for the same quality makes it a lot more valuable. And if you can do that with your product or service, that in general would be a big increase in your marketing and would just deliver a lot more results for you if you could start creating that value for somebody faster.
No, that this doesn't have to like time until they experience the dream outcome value, the massive value. It can just be like some value. So like a thought experiment, imagine if like we as an ad agency, if our client just signed a contract and the second their pen leaves the paper, their phone starts ringing off the hook. And it's like, that would be amazing. They'd be like ready to tell people. One of the things is referential growth marketing channel. It grows like a, and time to value is one of the easiest ways to give that super good first impression that makes people want to go talk about you. If you take a long time and you drag your feet, they're not going to have a great first impression, and they're most likely not going to just rave about you as much. So we would say time to value is massively underrated, and focus on it more. Try to provide value as fast as you can. All right, that's all we got. That was about an hour. Wow, that's a lot of metrics.
That was a lot of metrics.
It's definitely good to like talk through those though.
Yep. And we did not even hit all of them.
Oh no, we never will. So before we go, there's a few things I want to bring up. So if you guys are anything like that, like us, you kind of get overwhelmed with all the stuff going on in the marketing world. So we have this newsletter that we send out every Saturday morning. It's light, it's fun, it's an actionable tip. Maybe it's a story. This weekend we'll be telling a story. It's gonna be the hotel Blackhawk story, Ben, of us like,
Nice.
So it'll be kind of funny. And so we basically lifeguard for drowning marketers because we're trying to help keep you sharp and focused. And like I said, it's light, it's fun, it's actionable. So click the link down below to sign up for that newsletter. And then one more thing. So a lot of marketers and just business owners in general tell us this: I have no problem spending money on marketing if it works. You've probably said that once or twice before. We've said it. And the solution to finding what actually works, which neither of us have. Ben, you don't have magic, do you?
I'm no Harry Potter. I wish I was.
That would be sweet.
That'd be
We're working on it. Or you do the 4 T's, which is target, tailor, test, and track. So in order to do this very quickly and effectively, we've built a system that allows us to basically create up to 10,000 landing pages in the snap of a finger. And what this does is each page actually will dynamically populate your company's assets, like your products, your testimonials, benefits,
Logos, product details, etc.
yeah, logos, like colors, all that. So basically, if you're testing different campaigns, not only can you make those pages super quickly, but you can also test different variations through like Google Optimize. We can tell you exactly which variation is converting better. And that's kind of where our whole conversion funnel graphic comes into play. And then after that, after we've created all these pages, we have to actually gather the data to see what works. This whole show is about the data. So we don't want to just overwhelm you with it. We want to use the data that actually matters. So you can see on the screen here, based on things like ROAS and CAC to LTV, which more of those profitability metrics, we create a dashboard that tells you adjust in the yellow and then what we should do less of in the red, which basically just means, is it profitable or not? And then probably the best part of all, like I mentioned before, we're performance based, which means if we don't make you money, then we actually work for free. So anything you want to add there, Ben?
Just kind of basically the performance model means like we help determine what objective or KPI matters the most to your business. So whether that's, per lead, so we would get paid per lead. So every quality lead we develop for you guys, then we'd get paid, or maybe it's commission based. So for every sale, we'd get a percentage of commission from said sale. It could be like for a demo or something else. So it really is tailored to your company and what you're looking for. Our bread and butter is more than like construction companies, remodelers, carpenters, etc. But yeah.
So hop on a 30-minute discovery call, so we're excited to hear from you. We're what? You good? You all right?
Down the wrong coffee.
Nice. I'm over here getting blinded. You're dying, so I think that means it's time to end. So, all right, guys, we'll see you on Friday. And as always, thanks for joining us, and be mindful.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, see you guys.